it's worth considering, and I try to say this, I'm a Democrat, but I try to say this with as little partisan of a lens as I can. It is worth considering that there is a natural alignment between the anti-regulatory ideology of the Republican Party, certainly today, and the very powerful associations in this town, the bank lobbies, if you will. And I don't say that disparagingly. I work with them. They're important to my district, so I'm not sort of trying to fit into this morality play. But I am trying to say that it is worth considering as we think about examining that whole spectrum of regulation and different financing devices, how is the playing field tilted? And it is tilted in deregulatory ways. This Congress, the 112th, as we draw to a close, was arguably the most partisan of those 112 Congresses, and yet this piece of legislation shot through Congress and was signed by the President at an unbelievable pace. And, you know, ideas like reducing the definition of an emerging growth company from $1 billion to $750 million weren't even considered. Not only not by the Republicans, I couldn't persuade too many of my fellow Democrats that we ought to slow it down and consider these things, if only because here we were moving a piece of bipartisan legislation in this Congress, and isn't that a good thing? So when you have the natural axis that exists between the associations and the natural ideology of the Republican Party, and I'm using my words carefully, there are plenty of Republicans who understand the importance of regulation and whatnot, but nonetheless, the overall current there is a very powerful one. So when the White House says, we like this piece of legislation, it's done. And some of you will have heard this story. You know, many of the people who were intimately involved in crafting the ideas behind the Jobs Act on the definition of emerging growth companies, they said, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to ask for $1 billion in the House. And so, in fact, that's how it's drafted, even though that's kind of a crazy idea. But, you know, it may not get through the House. And you know what? If $1 billion in revenues for an emerging growth company gets through the House, they'll certainly stop it in the Senate. Well, we didn't stop it in the Senate. And again, I'm not trying to cast any sort of aspersion here. I'm just trying to illustrate the fact that that is a dynamic that we should be conscious of as we think about regulation.